Hello ladies, I'm back and I hope you're back too. And I want to do this more often. I get caught up in my housework, and of course I have had a home for many years, and I'm now digging myself out of some accumulation that all you need. People wonder how does that happen to you? They'll tell you, well, right now I'm just up to date, and I keep my photograph albums are all caught up, and my seasonal things are all put away and everything. But when you get older, you get more of a downline of people in your life, and they have weddings, and then there's funerals, and then there's events, and there are many, many things that you have to go to or that you have to do yourself, and those things get put further and further behind. So I'm going to try to come here more often so that you can have company while you work. And this is the purpose of these videos. And if you're new here, I don't have comments on the video actually because I don't want to monitor it. And I have a link to my blog. If you'll just go on over there, see what we're doing and what the blog is all about, go check out my friends on the blog roll. And my PayPal is there also. I just appreciate the encouragement you've all given me, and the emails I've gotten that say keep them coming. And I don't have to have the whole world. I just need a few people. I just need about 10 people to talk to. And I'm happy. I don't have any idea how many views I get. I'm outside today because I was doing some work outside, and I'm wearing my plaid shirt. This is one of those ones with the little ruffle down the front that I got at Walmart from a company called Time and True, which I quite like because they're using natural fibers. This one's made of rayon, and that's a derivative of cotton, I understand. And it has sleeves that can be rolled down to protect my bony arms, and it also goes with a denim skirt and still looks kind of feminine. I would rather wear my own homemade clothes. I just have not had time. I'm busy sorting things in that sewing room and getting things organized. And hopefully I won't slip back again into any bad habits. And I have been asked to do videos like this so that you can work while you listen. There isn't anything to watch here. You're going to see some cars going by, maybe some tractors, which is kind of annoying. But when you live in the country, you wish you did live in the country, because once there's a road there, somebody's going to drive on it. And so if you need a little company while you're doing something repetitive at home, or maybe you've lost your way and you feel like there's no purpose, and you've got this despondent feeling, hopefully I can cheer you up, and I can motivate you too. I hope to motivate myself. I've got a lot to do this morning, and I thought about, I'm going to get my work done and then I'm going to broadcast. That never will work, because the thigh bone's connected to the knee bone. As soon as you get the kitchen done, you see something else that needs to be done, and that's just going to take all day. So I decided to broadcast first and let you watch the trucks go by. And so this morning I have a lot to talk about. I hope I can last an hour. If you've got something to do, some folding, some mending, some canning, some washing up, some unloading, some loading, some sorting through papers. That's one of my problems. And books. Oh my goodness. I told myself I would never buy another. Once I started going through the books, I'm thinking, they didn't come all at once. They came one at a time, maybe one or two a year. But over the last 40 years, of course, you know the story. We've kept everything since 1952, which is a family joke. And sometimes we're made to be very ashamed of it. Someone will make some kind of remark about all those things, all those books especially. But when they need a book, they will call Mr. S and ask if he's got it, and he probably does, even though we haven't looked at it in 40 years. But I go through these books, and I'm thinking, what was I thinking? I've got to stay away from book catalogs and away from thrift books online, and unfortunately I do have a book to talk to you about today, and I hope to bring you a book every time, but hopefully these are the most valuable ones. I have been just gifting other people with the other kinds. People aren't wanting so many books anymore, but I get started in something and then I think, what was I doing? But it only comes very gradually. These things come upon you very gradually. So today I have been asked, and I promised somebody that I would talk about nutrition and cooking. I'm the wrong person to be listening to on that. I'm just terrible. I eat anything I want, anytime, and the other day though, I lost a pound. I dropped a pound of flesh, and I hope I never find it again. But I will talk to you about that a little bit too. I'll write that down on my list here. You know, I write these words down, and I think the word's going to trigger my brain, but I'll look at a word after a while. Like one day when I was talking to you, I noticed I had written Elizabeth Bennet's name on there, and I never did figure out what I was thinking. I thought, well, I'll know what that is, but no, you don't. You know, when you have children around, they become part of your brain. They're an extension of your brain. If you set something down, whether it be your keys or a pen or your purse, one of them will know where it is. They keep track of you in a store. They watch when they get out of the car. They look around. They know what's in the grocery bags. They know. And now I'm going around when there are no children around. I go around absentmindedly setting stuff down and then wondering why. How come you can lose something in a tiny house? Anyway, I want to get started on this nutrition and cooking because I want to assure you that I am not a nutritionist. However, I have had an interest in it over the years. But I lived in a time before nutrition was even thought of, broken down into tiny little bits, and where every food was known what was in it. I lived before vitamins. and so, but yet, it's interesting. Instinctively, those old homesteaders up in Alaska knew during those hard winters what they needed to get by, because many of them had been in the military, and my father was in the Navy, or I think it was the Navy, and they knew a little bit about the foods, that the military had to have, and they brought that knowledge into that lifestyle, and they instinctively knew things from their own. My parents both grew up in a very hard time. It was during the Depression, but instinctively, growing up on the homestead without knowing what was in what, they knew a couple of things, and I just thought of them the other day, and I thought I would share them with you. And one was they would make sauerkraut. Now, sauerkraut is something made with salt, cabbage and salt, and they'd make their own sauerkraut, and it tastes. I thought it tasted crunchy. Well, the new sauerkraut that you get in the jars, it's not very good. But you can get a fresh sauerkraut in your, in the fresh area where you buy your cheeses and your milk and things. You can get a fresh sauerkraut that's real crunchy, that's normal, that tastes good. But they instinctively knew from their parents and grandparents to put a tiny dab of sauerkraut on the edge of their plate to eat with their food. They wouldn't call it a probiotic, they didn't know, but they knew they needed it. I thought that was interesting, and it was even before. And so in the summer, they grew huge cabbages. I mean, there had been a volcanic eruption from a mountain called Mount Redoubt, and it had put a ash all over the garden area, and so everything was huge that year. And we had a lot of sauerkraut. Plus, we ate cabbage just raw. We'd go in the garden and eat it ourselves. But they instinctively knew that. Another thing that they instinctively knew, that you couldn't read it in a book, but it was passed down from generation to generation, was, and this has nothing to do with nutrition, but in a way, everything we do to our bodies affects the way food is processed and the way that we live. And one of the things that they did at night was soak their feet in a bucket of water, but I'm not sure. I was very little, so I can't remember what they put in it. I'm trying to think that they did put something in it. It could have been Epsom salts. It could have been, I'm not sure what it was. But they always soaked their feet before they went to bed. I thought that's pretty interesting. There were other habits that they had which were very, but not anything to do with nutrition. So we don't want to go into that. Don't get me off on that trail. So the purpose of this video is so that as you go and you're doing something tedious, you can listen, and hopefully my voice won't aggravate you. I've been studying these things and reading them to you about the voice and about inflection, and I can't always follow it. I catch myself sometimes in the bad habits that these books mention. But if you will not watch me, and there's really nothing to watch here except a few cars going by, if you find that interesting, and don't watch me and just take the video around while you're loading your laundry, while you're folding your laundry, while you're straightening something up. And I used to like to take a video with me and just listen to it. Just put it in and listen to it, because it was like listening to poetry or singing or music, because it just kind of paced me. It was comforting, and I would take it into whatever room I was trying to completely clean out. And it just helped me so much, kept me invigorated. So today I want to talk to you about nutrition. Oh yes, and I wanted to share my teacup with you today. This one is the only one I could find in the cabinet that kind of went with this shirt. It's very hard to match up a plaid, and I eventually want to get back to wearing florals when I get my sewing back in order. But this one is called, you know, there's no name on it, but it's by Duchess China of England. It's very good shape. The gold is still around on the edge there, and it's an apple blossom, and I think it's just beautiful. And the colors really go well with this plaid shirt. Of course, that's really important, isn't it, to match your teacup. Match your teacup. And of course, I don't want you to have to watch anything, but we want to talk a little bit about tea in here. And I know a lot of you don't drink tea, so I don't want to insist that that's what you have to do, and I don't want to offend anybody. But sometimes you get someone who's watching or listening, and they'll get offended over some tiny little thing. But anyway, take the stuff out you don't like, throw it out, and listen to this good stuff. Now, one of the great things about staying home is that you can make your own bread, and you can put 3 or 4 ingredients in it. And I would really strongly suggest that. Try to make your own bread. Now, the first bread you ever made will be like everybody else. It just might not work. It might not turn out. But don't give up. It's like the first painting. It's like your first quilt. You know, they had this worst quilt contest one year, and I went to look at it, and it was, everybody brought their first quilt. It was amazing they even saved them, because when I made a mistake in a painting or a quilt, that thing was gone, you know. They kept these worst quilts where they didn't have the fabric quite on the grain, and they were all sagging and hanging, and they had them all patched, and nothing matched, and the seams didn't match up, and they were, and somebody actually won a prize, quite a prize for worst quilt. And but the bread, you know, it doesn't always work out. For bread is funny because it depends on the weather and the atmosphere in your house, and the humidity, and all kinds of things. There's some kinds of weather that is really conducive to making bread, and you can kind of sense it once you get used to it. Now, if you make your own bread, it's packed with nutrition, and hopefully you'll be able to not feel that you have to be constantly laboring making bread. And that could be one of the reasons why the women of old had these tea towels, you know, and one of them would say Thursday bread, baked bread, or baking, because that was the day. They just do it for a day, and they would get their supply in there. And so another thing you can do is you can freeze loaves of bread that you make, but I will tell you why. As we go along, you'll discover why I suggest you make your own bread. I'm not necessarily saying that that you're going to not do well if you don't bake it, but have everything. Here's the principle. Here's the principle of all nutrition. Have everything as close to nature as possible. Now we know that you can't eat some things raw, because, you know, they don't digest very well. But at least have the real thing. Have it as close to nature. And for this reason, for years, many of us that are of a certain age have shopped the perimeters of the grocery store, because you go in and there's the fruit and vegetables over on one side, and then the fish and meats over on another wall, and then there's the bulk foods and the whole grains and things like that on another wall, and there's the dairy products, and to shop those outer walls means you're going to be closer to nature. Now, you don't have to go to a specialized store and pay 10 prices to buy your fruit and vegetables. Now, I grow some of mine, but I don't put myself under stress. I just grow what I want, and I go dig potatoes if I feel like it. If I want to, I'll grow something, and but I don't put myself under a lot of stress. I don't have a season that I'm constantly working in the garden and then not getting housework done, but I grow what I can manage. And if you will, so the grocery store is, you don't have to go a long ways away and pay a lot of money and get all this stuff that is supposed to be better or more organic. You can probably survive very well in your local grocery store. And we have a Safeway here on the West Coast, and I'm in Oregon, and also I know the Australians have Safeway. They are very meticulous with their fruit and vegetables. Both places that I've been, the employees cull that fruit every day. They look at it and they turn it over and they toss it if it's got a bruise on it or anything like that. So they have the best, most crisp everything, and I quite like it. You can go other places, but you can see and you can do your own comparing. So your local store is going to have, and most of Safeway is going, and some of these local grocery stores are going into organic anyway. So you don't have to, you can just go to your ordinary store. And the other thing is if you're talking about nutrition, I would say generally avoid anything that's packaged, anything that's bottled, anything that's bagged, anything that's canned. However, in some places you cannot get everything fresh, and if you'll read your label on your can, sometimes you can get the can with only one other ingredient, like some kind of fat or salt or whatever. I'm thinking of refried beans in particular. Sometimes you can get everything without a lot of additives. And so this is the problem, is that you've got to learn to make your own bread products. And I'm talking about crackers, I'm talking about what we call scones or biscuits, and anything else. In fact, I'm not against a good dessert as long as it's made with real products, real stuff, and not a lot of oils and not a lot of additives. And when you read a baked pie, you read the ingredients of a baked pie in the grocery store. I mean, the list is that long, you can't even pronounce the stuff. So just as close to its natural form as possible. It's okay to eat a pie. And one of the things I like to do is, I pick berries out here, or I pick pears or apples, and want to make a pie out of them. And the thickener, we used to do this way back. Well, my parents used it all the time, was tapioca. Tapioca is quite a natural product. It has manganese in it, has all kinds of goodies in it. In fact, tapioca, and it's a great thickener. And so we don't have to go to a special place. You can find what you need within your area without too much trouble. And I'm not a great one for diets. I don't like to go on diets, but I like to maybe change a habit, or try to adjust my ways in a different way. And so one of the things that I have been doing recently, and I hope I can keep it up, is, of course, it depends on the weather, is walking for about 20 minutes if I can. And the beauty of having a place that's out in the country is you've got a place you can walk. You don't have to drive to a park and walk. You can walk in your own area. However, if you have a house and a backyard, you could probably create a route. Remember Jane Austen saying, will you take a turn around the room with me? So you could do that. I mean, in the middle of cold weather or rainy weather or too hot weather, you could take a turn around the room. You could make a route and walk for so many minutes around your house. And it's actually not good to sit too long anyway. You know how people get irritated because children want to get up and move around and everything? That's actually very good for them. And it's probably better they do that than sit still, which might explain why they are thinner than we are. So I've been walking for 20 minutes in the evening and trying to drop some weight and, just feel better, and not sit too long. And so I would like to also talk to you about the bread just a little bit more. I had another note here that I wanted to tell you about the bread. There are a couple of things that sabotage our food, and I think harm the nutritional value of it. And one of the things is commercial bread. Now, I grew up before commercial bread. How many of you remember never seeing a loaf of bread in the grocery store? It was thought of as being totally ridiculous. And there were some things you just didn't see in a grocery store because it was just assumed that everyone had it at home. But one of the things that they do, when you read the ingredients on commercial bread, you're always going to see soy, and you're always going to see sugar. Now, I don't think sugar is bad because I use the raw sugar, but it's not good the kind that they use, and it's put into bread. And the other thing is soy. Now, you get all these people that want doctors that want their patients not to eat so much gluten. That would mean, from the bread. And so they will tell them, go buy non-gluten products, and you'll be reading that, it'll be gluten-free. But then there'll be soy in it and sugar. And so they sabotage it. And it's the same thing with many things. It's being sabotaged by this soy. And I believe that soybeans, and of course there are different kinds of soy, I know that. And I'm not a nutritionist, but you can look this up in your spare time. You don't have to listen to me. But I did notice that a lot of products that you like and you want, you start reading and then they've got soy in it. It's in everything. The same is with many other ingredients. So the idea is to buy products that have few ingredients in it. And so another thing that I've done as far as nutrition goes that I've learned the hard way is to not use oils except maybe avocado oil or grapeseed oil, but in general it's better to go back to using butter and lard if you have to. They just work better, just process better in the body. And I have noticed something, ladies. Maybe you'd like to know this because we're from the generation that was introduced to corn oil. Wesson corn oil, remember that? And it was, everyone was so excited about it. But once I stopped, and I've only recently stopped eating any kind of oil, and I will eat some butter, but I've noticed that those spots on my hands are diminishing. I'm not sure if it's from anything else. Maybe it is, or maybe it's just, my age or something. But I've had spots on my hands, when I was even in my 20s and 30s, I've had these brown spots like freckles, And I have noticed, since I have eliminated oils as much as I can from my diet, that my hands are clearing up. Those spots are fading. The other thing is that these oils, unfortunately, we don't know, how all of them are made and how they're pressed and where they come from. And you'll get something called canola oil. Well, what is that? Have you ever looked it up to see what it's made of? And ask yourself if that's really natural and something that you would commonly pick and eat. So you might want to think about that for nutrition. Also, so let me just recap this, and that is shop the outer aisles of the grocery store, okay? And try to make your own bread, because they're going to put a soy oil in it, and they're going to put extra other stuff, dough conditioners, and one of them was datum. I think I talked to you about that before. Datum is kind of like a fake iodine, because they used to put iodine, I believe, in foods or bread or something. And it's a fake iodine, and it's apparently not very good for you. And a lot of people don't realize how this affects their health, the additives. So today I also want to show you a book that I got. And I have been talking for 24 minutes, so I don't know how much longer I'm going to last, because all I have left to tell you is about this book. Oh, I wanted to tell you first, cooking the way I cook. Okay, everybody asks me this, and then again, I'm not an expert, and I don't know enough. I don't have enough knowledge of camera work to show you, how I cook. But here's what I do, and I've done this when I was raising my children too. I have a huge cooking vessel, cooking pan, or Dutch oven, which is these deeper ones, and I'll melt a tablespoon of butter in it. Put some dried onions or real onions in it, fresh onions in it, and a teaspoon of turmeric and a teaspoon of chili powder. And I'll just melt that all in there together. Then I'll lay my fish or meat or chicken or whatever on top of that. Then I will put the lid on and cook one side a little bit and turn it over and cook the other side a little bit. And then I'll add peeled, cut, fresh white new potatoes in there. And after that has cooked for a while, I'll add some kind of vegetable, like a green bean, or I'm trying to think what else. My family doesn't care for carrots for some reason, especially cooked carrots, so I don't use those. But just anything. You can put spinach in it, you can put anything in it. And the idea is you put the vegetable that cooks the fastest in last on top. And cook that, and I call it one pan cooking, and I used to do it for the children too. And that way there's not stuff all over the place when you're cleaning up, and serve out of the pan onto the plates. And as the children got older, they could get up and go get another helping if they wanted to. But that's generally how I cook. And I might add a garden fresh tomato to give that a little bit more flavor. Chop it up and add it on top. But you might want to experiment with this and see if that works for you. I have shown a couple of people how I do it, and it's simple. Not everybody will like that at all. Just people ask me about it. Then throughout the day, I will tell you something that we do. My husband loves popcorn, and he has it sometimes, but wanting to kind of change that habit, because it is a carb, and it does, as you get older, your body doesn't process as well, and so we want to not get too fat. So cut up a lot of cauliflower, a whole head of cauliflower, kind of looks like popcorn, and then mix it with a lot of tiny little bits of chopped celery, and keep it in little bowls around the house or wherever, or give individual bowls to whoever's in the family, and they can just snack on it all day long. And it seems to be there's a lot more nutrition in it without gaining the fat. So, but that's up to you. You can do what you want. I'm trying to not include so many grains, so much corn, and that's another thing that's in everything. I told you, soy is in everything, sugar's in everything. Well, corn is in everything too, and we just don't need it. So that's for nutrition. So shop your outer aisles. You can do one pan cooking, because all those flavors go together, and you can also, when you've taken the food out of that pan, you can make it soup. And one of the things I like to do is take all the chunks of food out, put it on a serving dish, and then stir that up and add a few more things and make a soup. And then I can serve a little bowl of soup. And your soups and your salads, if you can have a diet of soups and salads, because you can put meat in salads, you can put protein in salads and in soups. And the soups are wonderful because they keep the viruses and things flowing away from your body, flowing out of your body. So they're very good for, that's why, children were always given soups when they were sick. But soups are very good for you, and salads too. Now I want to read out of a book called The Jane Austen Diet, and it was written by Brian Kozlowski. I'm very appreciative of the fact that it was written by a man, because he observed a lot from the Jane Austen stories and movies, and my own sons loved them. They loved all the characters in these Jane Austen movies that were so popular at one time. And I'm always happy to see when a new type of book that's a takeoff on the Jane Austen life comes out, and I'm just waiting for the Jane Austen fashion, Jane Austen clothing. I'm waiting for someone to do that. It won't be me. So let me see. Now, do you remember in Sense and Sensibility when Eleanor was going through their finances to see what expenses could be reduced, and she came across sugar, and she says, "Well, we've only got 5 pounds a month, but we could do without the sugar. It's too expensive." Well, he has a chapter here on sugar. It's going to take me a while to read this. It's going to take me a while to read this, but he's actually done quite a good job on this. So if you've got something to do, please don't sit here and watch me. Please go do something. There really isn't anything here to see, but I am going to read to you. And so it's called So Much Trash and Sweet Things on page 85 of the Jane Austen Diet. Science has gradually noticed what Mary Musgrove from Persuasion recognized back in 1817. If overindulged to such a degree, sweet things have a dreadful habit of making us sick. Now, we knew that way back. Our parents knew that too much candy, too much sweets, too many sweets would make a child sick. They often would get sick. And they knew this. They also knew, as I recall, this was before diets came around. The one thing that they did when they wanted to lose weight was quit eating candy. That's the first thing that went was candy and sweets and pies and cakes. Anything sweet, they just eliminated it, and they lost weight. They didn't. Like I say, I lived in the day before diets. I mean, the kind of diets you see today that are real regulated. My goodness, I'm sorry about that awful car that just went past. I can still hear it. It's Saturday here, so it's a bit more noisy and congested around here as far as the traffic goes. But I thought you'd like to look through my arbor there, my Trump Day Triumph or Arctic Triumph or whatever it is over there, and see the view if you possibly can, if you happen to stop and look. Okay. Biologically sick, that is. Sugar isn't metabolized like other foods. Whether it's a spoonful of white sugar, brown sugar, honey, agave nectar, or high fructose corn syrup, all sugar acts basically the same in our bodies. About half of it heads straight to the liver to be processed, rather like alcohol. I want to talk to you about alcohol here, if you'll listen. The liver does its best to convert the sugar into energy. Have you ever had a pain in your liver, really, really hurt after you've eaten something at a potluck, maybe something sweet, a cake, pie, something like that? The liver does its best to convert the sugar into energy, but it gets overwhelmed very quickly. The equivalent of a couple of pieces of fruit, or less than a can of soda, is about as much sugar energy as your liver can store at any time. Let me just say that to you again so you won't have to rewind. The equivalent of a couple of pieces of fruit, or less than a can of soda, is about as much, that's talking about the size, not recommending a can of soda, is about as much sugar energy as your liver can store at any given time. So if you're going around not feeling good, you could be having a nutritional problem because of sugar. Later on, he'll explain how it actually robs your body of other nutrients. The rest must go somewhere. Most gets transformed into a less flattering form of energy called fat. That's on your body. For obvious reasons, converting sugar into fat isn't the healthiest process for your body to perform too frequently. There's a reason why modern sugar consumption and obesity rates have surged simultaneously. But there are less obvious reasons, too. As with alcohol, too much sugar being constantly processed by your liver can create some outstanding negative side effects. I hope this isn't making anyone sick. Fattening the liver type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol, and heart disease from the increased fatty triglycerides in your blood. High sugar diets can even wreck your natural bloom, to use a Regency expression. Now, around here, the men and women do not have, I'm on farmland, we don't have heart disease, and we don't have diabetes, and we don't have cancer. We have accidents. So that is what we're always on the lookout for, is accidents. Because once you have an accident and you end up in the hospital, then you have to be on medication. And that also affects your liver and your digestion and nutrition and everything. So accidents are the worst thing around here. And I don't want to describe what's happened to people. They have things fall on them. They run into things. They have equipment accidents. They fall off of things. And they're building something and they fall off of a roof, whatever. And so we're very cautious, always warning people about accidents. And be careful that you don't allow your children just to have accidents just for the experience or just to teach them a lesson. Make sure you shelter them from accidents, because it's a painful process to come back from an accident, and also that it's going to affect your body in so many different ways when you're recovering. So I don't agree with these people that raise children and say, oh, well, let them do this, let them fall down, they'll be okay. You know, I always cleared the path like a shepherd would. You know, it talks about the shepherd in Psalms 23, that where the shepherd would prepare, and when he said, he maketh me to lie down in green pastures. When a shepherd prepared he didn't just make the sheep lie down. He'd go and look for thorns and sharp things and rocks and things that would hurt his sheep, because it would interfere with the quality of their meat and of their wool. So he would remove all these things, and so they could lie down beside still waters, and it wasn't rushing water. That would make the sheep very nervous. And so with children, we look ahead in the path and we remove things. We don't let them stumble over things. We don't. That's very bad parenthood. If people are going around saying, and I've read this in some of these child rearing books, you know, oh, just let them fall. I've seen kids fall from things and their parents don't even think it matters, because after all, they're not hurt. But I think it's really important to teach children to be cautious with their bodies, because the body was given by God. We have to take care of it, and we shouldn't be careless. We should not be careless. And so accidents can be avoided. Even the Department of Motor Vehicles writes in there that accidents are not really accidents. They are all avoidable. They call them crashes. So, and I don't like that word accident either. I think, you know, there's a crash or there's a fall, but it could be, many things can be prevented. And so we teach them preventative behavior and preventative health. And so let's get back to the sugar, because that's also teaching you preventative health. Now, I'm not saying I'm an expert at this, and but I just find this man's writing very, very interesting. Even Regency doctors grasp, I'm reading from the Jane Austen diet. Even Regency, and of course it'll be backwards probably in your screen. Regency doctors grasp the tricky reality of sweetness, noting the specific reality of sugar sickness. That was an old term for diabetes. Whenever their patients' dependence on sweets got out of control, which explains Mr. Perry's intelligent response to the wedding cake controversy with Emma. Remember that? He was going on and on about that wedding cake and how bad it was for you, and too much cake. He's looking around at the wedding party and telling them not to eat the cake. With medical textbook accuracy, he acknowledges that the sugary cake might certainly disagree with many, perhaps most people, unless taken moderately. Unless taken moderately, the solution satisfies the strictest dieter in Austen world, Mr. Woodhouse. And it's still the most accurate solution today. Nobody can give up sugar completely, nor do we need to. Now here's another thing with people that have given up sugar completely. I think that's wonderful, but I don't believe it. I don't believe they gave it up, because I see these same people buying tomato sauce and ketchup and not reading on the bottle that it's made out of sugar. And they'll buy mayonnaise, and they'll buy bread, and you read on the label on bread it's got sugar in it. And they'll buy these packaged products that have sugar in them, so they're not really avoiding sugar. I mean, they'll think that they're buying oat bran bread and this is just so noble and they're doing it without sugar, but they don't read on. There's a lot of sugar and high fructose corn syrup in those, and soy. They sabotage it all. Anyway, back to the sugar here. Nobody can give up sugar completely, nor do we need to. Sugar has always been a natural fact and pleasure of life. Now, I don't know about you, but I've been in the Caribbean where we were given served on a plate by some members of the church when we went to stay with them when my husband was doing a meeting down there. And they had a little piece of sugar cane cut for us to chew on. It was really delightful. And of course, that's a natural product. Our bodies have no problem handling sugar in moderation, a biological knack we've inherited from our ancestors, who certainly didn't pass up the rare treat of a beehive dripping with honey when they saw it. Now, honey's not much different than sugar, and a lot of people today think that they're being quite good because they only eat honey, but a lot of the modern honey, the bees are fed sugar. Anyway, it's processed a different way, so it's supposed to be better and more digestible, but I don't want to get in. You can look this stuff up. You don't have to listen to me. So Austen saw sugar in much the same way. She lived in an age when sugar in any form was still regarded as a special treat to enjoy when the occasion arises. At Mrs. Weston's wedding, for example, everyone guiltlessly helps himself to a rich slice of cake for the simple reason that it is special. No, quite the opposite. Sweet things were always surrounded by an aura of specialness for Jane. No one in Austen world ate this way all the time. And see, this is our problem. We need to be saving anything like that for weddings or birthdays. One of the problems is, though, if you've got a family and there's 4 birthdays in the month of May, you have kind of a problem there. But generally, it should be saved for something special. The random purchase of a Regency dessert was enough to be included in the important nothings of her life. You know how interesting the purchase of a sponge cake is to me, she wrote to her sister in 1808. Conversely, one of the glaring giveaways that Mrs. Elton of Emma is absolutely dissipated, and clearly not from around the respectable parts of Austen world, is that she expects such sugary treats too often and at inappropriate moments. Notice she is shocked that refreshments at everyday card parties don't include a heaping bowl of ice, which means ice cream or sorbets. That's another thing you can do if you want a dessert, is you can make a sorbet out of your berries and your fruit and not add sugar. Just blend it up and make it into a real creamy sauce and pour it into a dish to freeze. And then every now and then scrape it up so that it's fluffy and put it back in and freeze it again. I guess you do this several times, but there you have yourself a little ice, like an Italian ice. She also finds the quantity of cakes served rather poor and shabby. The insufferable woman clearly has her sugar priorities mixed up. Though, to be fair, Austen had an easier time sorting the sugar priorities than we do. The expense of Regency sugar made it easier to limit it. I had told you previously about how Eleanor had said, well, the sugar's too expensive, we can eliminate it. We don't have to buy it. Just as the cheapness of modern sugar makes it harder to resist. Hence the now normal intake of 20 teaspoons a day of sugar, near toxic level, over 3 times what Jane was used to. And yet the reality remains. Unless the bizarre or impossible happens, we fall into a time warp, or we start locking up our sugar, or we capture sugar-laden schooners in sea battles. One thing that I think that we can do, when I was thinking about the sugar, goodness sakes, I should just say it when it comes because it just flies out of my head. Uh, it doesn't seem like sugar is ever going back to Regency standards. Well, said the still waiting Harriet, what shall I do? What would you advise me to do? You must take care of yourself, says Jane, and luckily recreating your own world of Regency sugar sanity is easier than it sounds. Below are the top 3 strategies Austen would have to use naturally to limit her own sweet dependence and keep sugar in its safe place. No locks, no battles, no time warps needed. Okay, the next part of this is called Satisfied with Less. So I want to talk to you about that before I read what he says here. I have seen people go off of sugar. See, I won't go completely off of it. I still like a little raw sugar. I won't deprive myself of that, and I like it when I'm baking or maybe on something, but maybe the berries are a little tart. I'll add a little of that raw sugar. But one of the things I've seen people do when they do without sugar is they'll buy these huge bags of, I'm trying to think what it is. It's a white substance. Goodness sakes, it's not supposed to have any calories in it. I can't even think of what the thing is called right now. I think it starts with a Z, but I'm not sure. I don't use it. I never even see it. But they'll buy bags and bags of this stuff and consume huge amounts of it because they still have the taste for something sweet. But the idea is, if you're going to do without sugar, get used to not tasting sweet things all the time. But if you start substituting it and you say, well, I'm going to take honey and I'm going to take this other stuff or this other stuff or this other stuff, and you're eating just as much, you're just defeating the whole problem. And the whole problem is a craving for sweet things. And if you will also always eat a protein or a cheese with anything that you're eating that is a dessert or something sweet or a carb, you'll find that you don't desire the sweet as much. So that's really important. And for nutrition, I mean, I know this wasn't supposed to be a video about sugar. I just happen to be reading this man's book, but to a great deal, sugar destroys the nutrition. It just seems to and kids are growing up not feeling good. They're whiny all the time. They have runny noses. They have, you might check into substituting something good. You can substitute a fruit, a vegetable. Eventually, the children will learn to like something else. But I think, of course, it can be done gradually. But it's by far easier to decrease your sugar intake than to increase your natural sugar sensitivity. Because what might be normal for us, what we now call sweet, too sweet or not sweet enough, simply wasn't the same in the Regency era. Too costly to use carelessly, Jane added sugar to her food and drinks with a purposefully light hand. Now, what I use the white sugar for is I like to make my own hairspray or other things that are that you don't eat. I use sugar for that. And I have in the old days they used to make the sugar water and they dip a comb in it when we did each other's hair. I've seen people do each other's hair, and they would dip a comb in it and then comb a strand of hair and then curl it up in a pin or a rag or a clip or something like that. And it was a gel, a setting gel, but also you could put it in a spray bottle and it would be hairspray. And so I do keep a little bit on hand, and also for people that come for tea that prefer it. And also, it's best not to lecture people. When you're having tea, just be pleasant. You don't have to tell them that sugar's bad for you and ruin their tea party. Our sugar will last a great while, says Austen, congratulating herself on how careful she's been with stretching her family's supply. The practice was so common, it gave nearly everyone in the Regency era, this must be going home traffic. I can't hardly talk over the noise. A much more heightened sense of sweetness than we are used to today. In fact, the now acceptable sweetness of modern desserts Even savory foods, I've mentioned this, like mustards, pickles, salad dressings, ketchup, would have certainly fallen into too sweet or even repulsive category for most Regency eaters. The good news, however, is, that's what I like about this book, it's got some cheerfulness in it. You can easily recalibrate your personal sugar sensitivity to these historically heightened levels, and that's why I say, goodness, I wish you could type in to me, but I don't want to do the, I don't want to do that. The name of that substance that they're all eating tons of because it's white and it looks like sugar, and they just love it. Oh, I can't stand it. It's so sweet, but that shows that their sweet sensitivity is so low that they can eat just as much of that as they do sugar or more. And I've seen people eat more of the sugar substitutes than they do sugar. So that's just defeating the purpose, and that stuff is worse for you. Researchers have found that sweetness is a fluid concept. The less sugar people eat, the better they become at tasting it. Isn't that the truth? You just become more sensitive. Essentially, you can train your taste buds to be, as Austin said, satisfied with less. Try it out on your next cup of coffee or tea. Take away a small, barely perceptible amount of sugar from the amount you're generally used to. 1/8 teaspoon should work. Give your taste buds a few days to get used to the new level of sweetness. Then repeat the process again, taking away another 1/8 teaspoon and waiting a few days to adjust. Continue until you reach astonishment beyond expression at how much sugar you've cut from your diet without feeling deprived. Conceal nothing. This is number 2 in this section here, and I've already been talking 51 minutes. I'm not sure how much further I'll go, but Austin lived in a world that was totally upfront and honest with its sugar use. In other words, Jane knew she was eating sugar. It was almost only added to foods, always, that were supposed to be sweet. And while you might think the same logic applies today, things are not as straightforward anymore. We now live in a world with far more secrecy and concealment, as they say in Emma. Sugar lurks in practically everything with a nutrition label, and foods that have never needed sugar in the first place, which was a consequence of the low-fat craze of the 1990s when food companies, pressured out of using fat, added the only flavorful alternative, sugar. Yeah, that was a problem. The fat made you satisfied, and you didn't want more. But when they took it out, you kept eating, wanting more, trying to get that satisfaction. This means that your low-fat yogurt, see, fat's not the problem, I'll tell you that. Your low-fat yogurt often contains more sugar than a can of soda, or that certain brands of tomato sauce have more sugar in one serving than the equivalent of a chocolate chip cookie, or that modern sandwich bread has almost a teaspoon of added sugar in each slice. That's why, if you're staying home, and this is a video for women who are staying home or want to come home, to encourage you. And one of the beauties of staying home is you can have the time to make a loaf of bread. So which is why we should all be reading these nutrition labels for the same reason. They may not be as interesting as mystery stories, but it's our duty to find out how much sugar is concealed with them. And if a number is too high for Regency comfort, bearing in mind that 4 grams of sugar equals 1 teaspoon, choose more natural alternatives. So I want to quit there because it's been 53 minutes and I want to excite you with the rest of it. I want to talk about alcohol a minute because lately, we want to be good examples to children and to young people around us because of the problem of alcoholism, and also alcohol does the same thing to your liver as sugar does. And the alcohol today in alcoholic beverages is not the same as it was in Bible times. It's not even natural. It's an additive, and I forget what it's called, but it is an alcohol that is added to quickly ferment this whatever it is, grapes or anything else. And one of the things that's really discouraging is that you've got little children around, or you've got a daughter around, and you want to do something and listen to something or watch someone do some scrapbooking or watch someone make a card online. And you get in this nice YouTube videos where people are decorating for spring or they're sewing. And it's nice because, you know, when you're home, especially with your home teaching your children and they're home learning, you can start to feel like you want to know what other people are doing, and you don't have time to run around and meet people and get in a group. And that's another thing, the reason, one of the purposes for this video is that homemakers just can't operate in a group. Now, we used to, in the olden times, bring our ironing over to each other's house and iron while we talked, and we would heat them. Now, this is in the old homestead days in the 1950s. We'd heat the iron on their wood cook stove and iron a whole lot of stuff while we visited. But in general, that would never work for me because I'm independent and I cannot work in a group. I have to concentrate. I have to concentrate on what I'm doing, and I have to be thinking about my family and what my plans are, and my mind is always whirling around with new ideas and things that I want to do or make. And so I can't work in a group as far as homemaking. Homemaking just really wasn't designed for a group. It's designed for a family. So, and I'm talking about, you know, the father, mother, and the children. And so one of the reasons that we like to watch YouTube or read books or whatever is because it's a nice way to socialize without interfering in someone's life or them, you know, imposing on you. And so we'll be watching these lovely videos on decorating or crafting or sewing or gardening or cooking. And some young lady is talking and she's so enthusiastic. There she is with a glass of wine, you know. And if you'll remember back in the days when Graham Kerr, and he was a cook and he was on television, and he was always, him and Tina were always drinking wine, just drink, and he became a terrible alcoholic and had to go through painful recovery. And now when he was, and lately, when he was on television, he was sporting a cup of tea. So what is the problem? Why can't they use a cup of tea, or just please use a teacup and not let us know that there's wine in that? And so you've got your children, you know, watching, and you're all trying to share all this stuff, or maybe you have a Christian friend over for something, and you decide you want to look up a recipe together, and you watch somebody make it, and she's tipping the alcohol. So I wanted to warn women about this because it's not a good example to do this in, you know, because of the influence. And my husband has such a good sermon on this years ago that you might want to consider. Now, I'm not going to stop being your friend if you tell me you have a glass of champagne at someone's wedding. By the way, we don't drink at all. And most of the members of the Church of Christ actually traditionally have never drank. And when they do, if they drink, we notice they are probably the weaker members. They really aren't strong, and they're not actively involved in the church or in their spiritual life for some reason. But the alcohol, he'll tell you this. When you ask a question, how do you become drunk? They'll say, well, you know, I know when I'm not drunk, and I know when I am drunk. But that wasn't the question. Is how does it happen? What is the process? Do you drink a lot of coffee? Do you get drunk on a lot of tea? Do you get drunk on the thousands of other things there are to drink? Have you ever looked at a list of good, delicious, pleasant things there are to drink? All the things, the smoothies, all the stuff you could make yourself out of berries and everything. And you could put, one of the things we used to do that was fun when it was our anniversary is I taught the children how to do this. We'd get out the goblets. You know, we've got these special goblets that we got for our wedding, and we wanted to use them. And we don't want anyone to think, we don't want to be a bad influence, and we don't want anyone to think that we drink. But we would we'd get ginger ale, Canada Dry ginger ale, and pour it into the glasses, and then a drop of purple Welch's grape juice, purple or red, just a drop and it would turn pink. And that was our pink champagne. And the kids were allowed to drink it, and they thought it was wonderful. And I'm from the olden times, back in the 1950s, when soda pop was considered quite grown up. And it was interesting, to drink soda pop was so special. It's like Jane Austen, to drink a Coke or a soda pop was so special. You didn't drink it all day, every day, but it only was on special occasions. And so it's hard for people to understand that, I'm sure. But let's go back to what Mr. S says in his famous sermon on drinking. And first of all, he explains how much alcohol is added to the booze today as compared to the naturally fermented things, which even the Bible warned about in those days when it was naturally fermented. Compared to, and how much more harmful it is, but how it impairs your judgment, and that if you take one drink of alcohol, of anything with alcohol in it, he says you are one drink drunk. You are one drink on the way to being drunk, because there's no other way to get drunk. Only you have to start with a drink. And people will say, well, I only had one drink. But don't you realize that that is one part in you that that you really are. He says you are one drink drunk, and if you take two, then you're two drink drunks. And but I wish that he would get on the video and teach this sermon. Now, I don't want to make enemies with any of you that think it's okay to have a drink, and you'll often use scriptures and say, well, the apostle said, take a little wine for your stomach's sake. And when you look that up, though, there was a church bulletin that Mr. S had done recently, and he did quite a bit of research on it, and was talking about how wine was a word that meant grape, or vine, and from the vine. And so not always was the word wine the same as the word alcohol that we think of today. Just like in Jane Austen, it's not the same. And so when wine was mentioned, sometimes it meant, well, it was still in the grape. And a lot of people will use that and say, oh, wine was mentioned in the Bible. But we have to make a distinction between, you have to look these things up and try to see it in perspective. And the other thing that I want to ask you, is it really necessary? Do you have to drink it, and is it addictive? That's another thing we need to consider. And I know there are a lot of other drinks that are addictive or bad for you, but I've never seen a budget ruined, a family ruined, a home ruined, a relationship ruined, or anybody end up in total poverty drinking non-alcoholic drinks, coffee, tea, or soda pop, or anything like that. Or, they do cause harm in many ways, but not to the extent that alcohol does. Now, you might think that it's safe, but look, and here's an illustration that Mr. S uses, and I don't want to steal his thunder, but he talks about taking a drink is like walking through a snake pit. Some people are going to get bit, and some people aren't. So who wants to walk through? So in anything, even sugar doesn't take as long to bite you as alcohol does. So so we want to do right and be good examples to people around us. And so when I talk about watching videos, that we're watching a video, and then this lady pours herself a drink of wine, and right in front of you hadn't seen it before, and you thought this is going to be about decorating, but then she decides to sit down in front of the fireplace and drink her wine, or even beer. And this is a sad thing. It's become a real problem now with women too, especially with women. Back in the 1980s, I believe it was the 1980s, but it might have been, you can look this up too, you don't have to listen to me. The nation of France, and I don't know who was the president at the time, but they recognized what a problem alcoholism was to the young people, because their industries were suffering, their military was suffering, and my husband always likes to tell the joke about Charles de Gaulle, and one of the presidents of the United States was over there reviewing the troops and everything, and he said, well, how many troops do you have in your army? And he said, about half. And he was referring to the alcohol. But anyway, France decided to do something about this in the 1980s, I believe, and they invested quite a bit of money in an ad campaign with billboards and things in magazines, and even in the doctor's office, literature and brochures and stuff to give to young people to persuade them not to take any alcohol before they were 25 years old, because it was discovered that if they would not drink it before they were 25 years old, they wouldn't like it as much, and they wouldn't be as inclined. And it's easier to be addicted when you're younger. That's so sad, isn't it? So, so they could get their country working again and prosperous, and you know how what we like for our country too. We want everyone to be healthy. We want them to be happy. We want them to work. But it is becoming a real problem here in the United States. And I remember 50 years ago, I lived in a foreign country, and I don't want to tell you how old I was. You know, I'm approaching 70, so I guess it doesn't matter. But I was shocked at how many young people were drinking, and I was just shocked. And I wanted to come back to the U.S. so bad, because it wasn't generally that way, you know, in the 1950s and the 1960s. And so I'm here, you know, and here it is, 50 years later, it's come back to us, and it is a real problem. So I just really don't think it's a good idea. There are so many pleasant things you can drink at a wedding. You don't have to do that. There's so much. You know, the other day there was a wedding here, and the people brought in over to the church building over there. I wish I knew how to show you from the back camera, but here, I'll show you where that is. See if that, nope, that doesn't work. They brought in these wonderful containers with spigots on them, and they had a little section in the top for fruits and vegetables, whatever, and they had cucumbers in there, and I drank all that water, and I drank the cucumber water, and I drank the lemon lime water. Oh, the lemon lime water was good, and it looked so pretty in the glass. And they had watermelon water, and they had strawberry water, and they had them all around the fellowship room for this wedding. And you could go to these different stations and get a different flavor of water. It was absolutely magnificent. But the summer was over by that time, and when I went looking for one of these water containers, one of these pitchers, there was no such animals, so I missed out on that. But I just remember how pretty it looked, and it was all iced, and it was so pretty, and there was no alcohol at this wedding. And despite what you may think about our president, he does not drink, and he taught his children not to drink, smoke, or take drugs, and that is one thing that I can respect him for. And, you know, those people aren't going to be influencing. As a matter of fact, there was a young, I believe it was for the Black Americans, the president put something on in the White House for business, you know, to help them with their businesses and to share a lot. And he gave them a steak dinner, and there was no alcohol, but they had apple juice in the glasses. Now, that is really good, because you want to be have good judgment and be in your right mind if you want to run a business. And look, I just think it's sad that we think that it's important, that people think that, especially women, you know, it's not very feminine. Drinking is not very feminine. And that's just my opinion. You don't have to listen to what I say. But, you know, look up a lot of this stuff and see if you can draw a conclusion. And so, ladies, it has now been an hour and 9 minutes. You've seen all those cars go by. I hope you've got something done, but, you know, really, I've got to quit pretty soon. I was hoping to sit here and, you know, I might come back and do another one so you can see the sunset behind me. And I hope it's been a pleasant time for you. Hope I haven't annoyed you to death. I realize a lot of you won't agree with me, but I'm just using my free speech. And you can take it or leave it. And if you want to leave it, there are probably a lot of videos and ladies that are homemaking that you could go to that would benefit you more, that you would like more. But I do appreciate your kind attention, and I appreciate you coming here. And this, actually, I like it better than having a ladies class because I can pack more information in it and visit more and visit longer. So ladies, I hope that you have a wonderful day. I'm going to try to figure out how to get my cursor to turn this thing off. And God bless you, and have a wonderful, successful day. Hope you got your clothes out on the line, or you got your meal in the slow cooker, or you did some sewing. And hope you enjoyed the Jane Austen diet book. And maybe I'll read some more out of it to you. Let me know what you think. Please leave me a comment. That's really what motivates me. And I hope I can be back sooner and do these more often. Thank you, and goodbye.